Welcome to another Five Below art supply video. There's a lot to unpack in this one. Let's see what I got. I bought a gray and brown tone sketchbook. I found a light box, which could come in handy in the future. A watercolor cake set, gouache, acrylic paint, a set of 9x12 canvas panels, a set of brushes, another drawing set, this one with gray tones, and a 70-pack of colored pencils. Let's start with the drawing set. Here's a side-by-side comparison of the set next to the set from the first video. The new set features some charcoal and graphite sticks and a grayscale pastel set. There's only one blending stump, but everything else is the same, except for the barrels of the graphite pencils. Next, I take a look at how the materials perform on the gray paper. The graphite, charcoal, and white charcoal all show up on the gray paper, so that's a good start. There isn't a huge difference between the 6B and 4H pencils. I thought the 6B would have been darker. There's barely any difference with the graphite sticks compared to the charcoal, which has a better range of value. The pastels went down nicely. The lightest gray is almost the same color as the paper, so it is hard to see. The pastels blended wonderfully. Now it's time for a drawing. I filmed the drawing using this mini digital camera that I bought at Five Below. The frame rate is a bit choppy, but when sped up in a video editing program, it makes for a great time lapse. For this drawing, I decided to use a combination of the pastels and charcoal. I blurred out the timestamp in the lower left corner because I hadn't set the date and time yet, and I didn't want a timestamp to begin with. Later on, I went into the settings and removed the timestamp, and set the correct date and time. Another thing I had to change was the length of the video files. They were set to 1 minute each, so I changed it to the max of 10 minutes. It's much less tedious editing 6 10-minute videos from an hour-long recording than 60 1-minute videos. Here's the finished drawing. I really like how this came out. The soft pastels and charcoal worked well together. The white charcoal pencil still had some trouble layering, so I had to use the white pastel stick for the lightning bolts, but I did fine with the highlights on the lighthouse. I also really enjoyed the drawing process, and would highly recommend this set for anyone for sketching or finished drawings. Not sure how the pastels would work with fixatives, and I didn't want to potentially ruin the drawing, so I stacked a bunch of sketchbooks over this one to help press the pigment into the paper. The next step would be to frame it under glass with a mat separating the drawing from the glass. Now onto the colored pencils. They come in this flimsy plastic tray within a soft plastic case. Let's see if they're any better than the colored pencils from the first video. Three pencils in, and I was done with the flimsy tray, and I put them back into the case and continued. They seem to be showing up decently compared to the first set, but let's be sure and compare the black from this set to the first set. Yep, the 70 count and colored pencils are more pigmented than the artist quality colored pencils. It's not a huge difference, but it's better. Next, I tried the pencils on gray paper and they barely show up, so they are best used on white paper. Now it's time for another drawing. I'm using the pencils on the sketchbook paper from Five Below. It is a bit thin, so I try not to press too hard, but easier said than done. I did the initial sketch with black, as I figured I would need to come back in with the black for shadows later on. The blues were actually rather pigmented in this set. Not all of them, but the dark and vibrant blues seemed to show up well. As for the greens, they were light to mid-tone at best. There were no true dark greens in this set. In the end, I think it turned out decent. I probably should have gone in heavier with the black pencil for more depth, but the paper felt like it was close to tearing, especially with the fir tree. I wasn't done with these pencils yet, however, as I wanted to see how far I could push them on the watercolor paper, which is thicker. I decided to do a winter scene with a focus on the trees to see how much depth I could create between the highlights and shadows. I think I achieved the results I wanted. I would have put more depth in the sky, but I didn't want to run out of space on my memory card, as the previous drawing took over 2 hours to create. Now, onto the watercolors. At first, I was going to do a comparison between the watercolor and gouache, but I didn't like how the watercolor piece was turning out because, let's be honest, watercolors are not my strong suit. I also found out that removing the tape also peels the paper. In my frustration, I started a new piece by wetting the entire page and splashing a bunch of blue on the paper until I had an idea of what I wanted to paint. I don't know if it was my technique or the watercolors or both, but I wasn't super happy with it. So I decided to do a sunset scene with more colors and some more pines silhouetted against the sky. It turned into a somewhat misty sunset scene, and I was somewhat more pleased with it. I wished I had gone into more detail with the evergreens. Time for the acrylic paints. I was more confident with the acrylic paints as I was a bit more familiar with the medium. Not as much as drawing media, but more than watercolor. I begin with a sketch of the main focus of the piece, which is a mountain with ski trails. This mountain is loosely based on Okemo Mountain in Vermont. Okemo has more ski trails than depicted in this painting. I was originally going to have snow-covered trees, but I didn't like how it looked, so I changed it to trees without snow on them. I'm rather pleased with how this turned out. I also like how the brushes are performing. Now we arrive at the last art supply to try, and that is gouache. The gouache is in a jelly form, much like Hime gouache. In fact, the case is pretty much identical both in shape and color. After fighting to get the seals off of each individual packet, it was time to paint. I only had about an hour or so left of space on my memory card, so I decided to do a somewhat quick impressionistic style painting. The gouache went on kind of gloppy, but that was alright, as this was supposed to be a bit impressionistic. I was able to blend it out a bit with some vertical strokes. Here's the end result. I really like how this turned out despite having limited time. It definitely has an impressionistic look. In the end, my favorite pieces were this one, the lighthouse, and the mountain with the ski trails. I think the colored pencils would be better suited for coloring, and I'm unsure about the watercolors. They might work better with a line and wash technique. Perhaps I could explore this in another video in the future. We'll see. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you in the next one.